The restaurant was quiet in the way expensive places always are, where silence isn't empty but controlled. Soft piano notes floated through the air, glasses clinked gently, and conversations stayed low, as if money itself demanded respect. Outside, rain slid down the tall windows like slow-moving secrets. At the corner table sat a man who never waited for anything. Private jets waited for him. Boards waited for him. Governments waited for him. Tonight, even the future seemed to be waiting. He studied the papers in front of him, thick, official, heavy with promise. A deal worth more than most people could imagine in a lifetime. One signature away from becoming even more untouchable. Across from him, two men in tailored suits smiled politely, their confidence rehearsed, their patience calculated. He lifted his pen. That was when she appeared. She wasn't supposed to matter. She wasn't part of the deal. She wasn't in the room when power was discussed. She was just the waitress, refilling water glasses, moving silently between tables, trained to be invisible. But as she placed the glass near his hand, her fingers trembled. He noticed, not because he cared about waitresses, but because nothing around him ever trembled unless something was wrong. His eyes flicked up, irritated at first, ready to dismiss her presence. She leaned in slightly, just enough that only he could hear her. "Don't sign that." The words were barely louder than the rain against the glass. Time stalled. The men across the table stopped smiling. The pen hovered in midair. For a fraction of a second, the billionaire thought he misheard. People didn't speak to him like that. Especially not strangers. Especially not staff. He looked at her face. There was no arrogance there. No desperation. Just fear. Real fear. The kind that doesn't ask for attention, only begs to be understood. "What did you say?" he asked quietly. Her manager stood frozen near the bar, sensing danger without knowing why. She swallowed. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. But I had to." One of the men across the table laughed nervously. "Sir, if there's a problem with the service, we can address it later." The billionaire didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on the waitress. "Why?" he asked. She hesitated, then shook her head. "I can't explain here." That was enough. He placed the pen down. The room seemed to inhale sharply. Deals like this didn't pause. They moved forward, crushing hesitation under momentum. One of the men leaned in, his voice suddenly sharp. "Is there a problem?" The billionaire smiled, but it wasn't warm. "Yes, there is." He stood up, folded the papers carefully, and slid them into his briefcase. Meetings over. Chairs scraped. Voices rose. The dealmakers protested, threatened, reasoned. But he was already walking away, raincoat over his arm, eyes still on the waitress. "Take a break," he said to her. Now, she didn't argue. They sat later in a quiet private lounge, far from ears trained to listen. She clasped her hands so tightly her knuckles were white. "My brother used to work in finance," she began. "Not at your level. Lower. He worked for a company connected to that deal." The billionaire listened without interrupting. He had learned long ago that truth often arrived quietly. He found discrepancies, shell companies, hidden liabilities, risk buried so deep it looked clean on the surface. When he asked questions, they fired him. When he didn't stop asking, they threatened him. She looked up, eyes shining. Then he disappeared. Silence settled heavy between them. "I recognize the logo on the folder," she continued. "I've seen it in his notes. I've seen the names. When I realized who you were signing with, I couldn't stay." Quiet. The billionaire leaned back slowly. His face was calm, but inside, alarms were screaming. He had built an empire by trusting data, lawyers, experts. He had ignored intuition more times than he could count. Tonight, intuition had a voice. He made a call, then another. By morning, teams were digging. By afternoon, cracks appeared. By nightfall, the deal collapsed under the weight of what had been hidden. Investigations followed. Lawsuits. Arrests. The kind of chaos that destroys careers and reputations. And fortunes. His fortune would have been next. The next evening, the restaurant buzzed again, unaware of how close history had come to being written differently. The waitress stood behind the counter, expecting to be fired, maybe worse. Instead, a man in a tailored suit handed her an envelope. Inside was a card with a single sentence. "You saved me from a $1 billion mistake." And beneath it, a check large enough to change her life. But the real change didn't happen to her. It happened to him. For the first time in decades, the billionaire sat alone that night, staring at the city lights, thinking not about growth or dominance or control. He thought about how close he had come to losing everything because he believed power only spoke in boardrooms, not in whispers. He funded a private investigation into her brother's disappearance. The truth surfaced months later. The system had tried to bury him. It failed. The billionaire restructured how he made decisions. Fewer yes men, more questions, more listening, especially to voices that were never meant to be heard. And sometimes, late at night, when rain tapped against the glass of his office windows, he remembered the trembling hands, the quiet courage, and the warning that didn't come with confidence or authority. Just truth. Because the most dangerous mistakes don't announce themselves loudly. They wait. And sometimes, the only thing standing between disaster and survival is a single voice brave enough to whisper. "Don't sign that.